raising up other people, they're enlightening other people. Look at it from verse 17. Romans chapter 2, reading from verse 17 now. It tells us in verse 17, behold, thou art called a Jew, and restest in the law, and makest thy boast of God. Verse 18, in verse 18, and knowest his will, and approved the things that are more excellent, being instructed out of the law. In verse 19, it says, and art confident that thou thyself art a guide of the blind. That's a worker. You are confident, I'm a guide of the blind, a light to them which are in darkness. And then in verse 20, it says, an instructor of the foolish, a teacher of babes, which has the form of knowledge and of the truth in the law. In verse 21, thou therefore that teachest another, teachest thou not thyself? You teach others how to repent. Have you taught yourself how to repent? You teach others as you disciple them how to live a converted life. Have you spent time teaching yourself how to live that converted life? You believe in holiness and you teach holiness. Sit down. Have you taught yourself the implication of holiness in the life of a Christian man, of a Christian woman? You teach about the rapture, and you say the rapture can happen anytime. We ought to be ready. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Have you sat down? Have you taught yourself how to be ready for the rapture? Thou therefore, which teaches another, teachest thou thyself, that thou preachest that a man should not steal. Does thou steal? Do you steal money? Do you steal office? Do you steal position? Do you take the authority that belongs to another and then hold that to yourself? Are you stealing the honor of other people, and then you have that to yourself, that the teachers a man should not steal? Does thou steal? Verse 22, it says, thou that sayest a man should not commit adultery, dost thou commit adultery? You know, sometimes the illustration I want to make, the brother should not bother about the illustration, and the sister should not bother about the illustration. You know, we need to use concrete examples to help the people who are, maybe they're doing the same thing, or maybe they're about to do the same thing. Conflict between a pastor and another pastor. And the other pastor is saying, hey, pastor, I don't appreciate the way you contact my wife, or even send me to my wife. Every time, my wife, my wife, my wife. And there's problem in the home of that brother, because the brother is feeling, my wife is not giving me all the attention I need. The attention is on senior pastor so and so. Now, the husband is not accusing that other man for adultery. He's just saying the relationship is too close. He doesn't want it. And the wife is saying, what's the matter with you? Why don't you, what's this, what's this? Wife, listen to your husband. The family first, before the church came. the family, an institution of God before all the other organizations. Your husband says, I don't want this. You knew your husband before you knew that, whatever, overseer, leader, pastor, whatever. And so if your husband says, let this stop, let it stop. That's Christianity. Thou that says a man should not commit adultery, dost thou commit adultery? Thou that abhorrest idols, dost thou commit sacrilege? That's where the word is found. Now sacrilege, let's come back to Romans chapter 12. Now, as for sacrilege is self-exaltation. Self-exaltation. The one that exalts himself above the word, above the Bible, above the doctrines, above preaching, above anything. Self-exaltation. Well, it says in Romans chapter 12, reading from verse 2. In Romans chapter 12, reading from verse 2, it says, and be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and the perfect will of God. And then in verse 3, it tells us in verse 3, it says, for I say, through the grace given unto me to every man that is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think. Let's sacrifice self. Let there be no self-exaltation. We're told then if there is avenging with bitter vengeance. Avenging with bitter vengeance. There are people who think they are serving the Lord and they're full of revenge. They're full of bitterness. And they're full of avenging. That happened and that happened. I'm going to, throw that stone back. Sacrilege, what you think you're serving. In Romans chapter 12 verse 19, dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves. Avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. Avenging with bitter